To Bill Corum as he comes.
Just for a minute. Thank you, Tim. Wow, when I sat down, there was only like 6 people here. Now look at all the people. It's really an honor to be here. It's a different message for me. I do it when God leads me to do it, but normally I speak about 80 or 90 times a year in prisons, and I share my testimony. And John, you were talking about sitting down with your kids and telling them about your life, and that's something I never wanted to do, John, because my life was so messed up and so secret. I've got 4 kids that all knew I'd been in prison in 10 different states. They knew I was a drug dealer, implicated as being one of the leading cocaine dealers in Kansas City, and was on my way back to prison to serve a life sentence. They knew that, but they didn't really know me. And in 1989, when I was on the 700 Club, they asked me to write a book, and I said no. And then when I was on the 700 Club again in 2001, they said, can we write a book of your life? And I said no, because I didn't want my 4 kids to know the truth of my life, because it was so messed up. And 2.5 years ago, almost 3 now, God made me write a book, and that book now is all over the country in 2,000 prisons and jails, and it's changed my relationship with my 4 kids, because when they read the book, it's brought us closer together, letting them know what their dad was really like. So I'm excited to be here today, and I can't wait to get this thing going. And I've got a friend that I've done the Father's Blessing with a few times, and we've done a lot of ministry in prisons together, and he's just been a blessing in my life, and kind of a role model to me as a father. He's a young man as far as compared to me. I'm 72. Actually, tomorrow I'll be 72 years old tomorrow. And but that's not the end of the story. I'll actually be 73 on September 20th, 3 months from now, because I was 9 months old when I was born. So I'll be 72 years and 9 months old tomorrow. So anyway, my friend Bubba is in his 30s, and he's 40 now. He just turned 40. But he's got 6 kids, but he's just an awesome father. And I love traveling with Bubba. And I love traveling with him, too, because if anybody picks on me, I got Bubba there. So there's only 3 men in the world that's ever bench pressed a Harley, and Bubba's one of them. So without any further ado, give a big hand to Bubba.
Well, good morning. I'm getting props. It's good to be here with you guys this morning. As Bill said, my name is Bubba, and it is legally Bubba. So it's not a nickname. It's not a whatever. You look at my driver's license. It says Bubba. The IRS calls me Bubba, so it's legit. That's how I roll. Now, I will say it wasn't my given name, but it is my legal name, okay? And you'll kind of get the gist of it as we go through. But I grew up in Iowa. So did you, apparently. Or southeast Iowa, Ottumwa, Iowa. Anyone know where Ottumwa, Iowa? Anybody ever watch MASH? Radar Riley was from Ottumwa in the show MASH, right? So now you know Radar Riley and Bubba from Ottumwa, so if you ever have that trivia again, you can answer it, all right? But I have had the privilege to travel with Bill to a lot of prisons and go to a lot of places and do a lot of things. But one of the greatest honors for me now is being a dad. And I have been in front of 50,000 people in Cairo, Egypt, speaking and doing some of the things that I do. And they end up chanting your name, you know what I mean? And it's just like, Baba, Baba, you know what I mean? But Baba in Arabic means father. It's very close, Baba and Baba. So I don't know if they're saying father or saying my name, I don't know. But I was in front of 50,000 people, and screaming my name. And if you think about it, if you have that many people screaming your name, your head could probably get a little bit big, right? I mean, get a little excited. But even more important than hearing my name screamed by 50,000 people is going home, and when I hear the 6 say, Daddy. that has more impact than anything else. I grew up in Iowa. I was a short, little, kind of heavy, round kid. Overweight, chunky, whatever you want to say, right? And if you can imagine, how many ever seen those kids or what they look like, but little overweight, kind of chubby kids, right? Majority of them are very, very happy. I'm not sure why, but they have a lot of joy. That was me. You know, I was one of those kids that when you play baseball, where do they put the worst player on the field? Right field. That was me, right? Playing ball, watching the butterflies going on the flowers and checking out the things going by. Not much happened out in right field, so that was me. But just kind of give you a little background, it's like I was really just a little bit, I was happy, just loving life, loving who I was. But then when you go to school and you look different, maybe dress different, have maybe some deformities, or you act different or something like that, you kind of get singled out. Well, being that short little heavy kid, you can kind of imagine what happened at school, the names and things that I got called. And I know if you're here, you may realize that we have an extreme opportunity as parents, as fathers, to speak life, to speak encouragement over our children and our friends and family. Or we also have an opportunity to speak death and curse. Well, going to school, I had all those things spoken over me, and I felt them. And honestly, those things, they can cut deep internally. But then I would go home and hoping and or expecting the man who lived there to treat me differently than the kids at school, and maybe to lift me up and to protect me and to care for me and to guide me and to love me. That didn't happen. He was the one that actually tore me down the most. It's my dad. My dad would say things to me like, "You're no good, you're worthless, you're not going to amount to anything. You're so stupid." And when you hear those things so much, you tend to start to believe them. I was in the 8th grade, continuing to hear that berating of those verbal words, of those things spoken over my life. And I went down to my dad's workbench. I grabbed one of his razor blades and I went up to my room. I, at the time, was enthralled in music. I loved music because it could take me away. It could take me places that I didn't have to go anywhere physically, but it could take me places. I could leave my own world. I could go away, all those things. So as I went up, I turned on my radio like I always do so that it wouldn't seem abnormal to my parents, and I shut my door. And I opened up my window. It's the middle of winter. I like cold. I'm not a fan of the heat. I have a sweating thing that goes on. And I was telling Bill last night, I could sweat in the middle of an air-conditioned room just peeling an orange and just sweat. It's just one of those things. But so I like cold. It's in the middle of winter, and I opened up that window, and I could just, you know that smell of cold? That cold. It's one of my favorite smells, right? And I was just sitting there staring out and watching the cars go by, and honestly, it was at the time where the trolley tracks were still down the middle of this brick paved road, and I could see the cars going by and it's smelling that cold air, and I had this razor blade sitting on my windowsill, and I could just smell the cold, and I picked up the razor blade. It's been there for a little bit, and it was cold. I could feel the cold. And I was, in my mind, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them. And then as I took that razor blade and I started to slice my wrists, a song came on the radio. Now, if God can use a donkey, okay? A song came on the radio by Ozzy Osbourne and Lita Ford called "If I Close My Eyes Forever." So as I started to cut, that song came on the radio, and I started to listen to those words. Set the razor blade down, but I continued to use it on my body. I was a cutter. Everywhere that I have tattoos to this day are places where I had cut, and I've been covered by Jesus, okay? stopped, so I didn't finish with the suicide, but I continued to raise the weight on my body. I had no idea how to be a man. Wasn't shown it. And then if you watch TV, even today, you don't see a positive, loving, caring father. So that's what I was shown. And I can honestly remember the first time that I felt a man. Like, I felt that I was a man. 17 years old. My dad was an alcoholic, very verbally abusive. And I was sitting at a party, and I was holding that red, white, and blue can. And I looked at this Budweiser in my hand, and I said, I'm a man. 17 years old, that's what I was shown. That's what I felt. I felt that I was a man. Then I tried to discover how to be a man in relationships with women, and then also pouring my life into sports. Because honestly, the first time that my dad said that he was proud of me, the only time my dad said he was proud of me, is because of my performance in football. Now, the entire time this stuff was going on, we went to church every single Sunday. He was a member of the choir. He had a big business in town. He's a drug dealer. He's a pharmacist. It sounds kind of funny, but he's a pharmacist, all right? It's taking a little bit for some of y'all. It's all good, all right? He has a pharmacy, and he would, okay, sorry. Just jokes, y'all. But we had to look this part, right? We had to look like this family that had it all together. So we went to church, we did all these right things, we looked good on the outside, but then when we go home, it was complete and total dysfunction. It was not the same. It was not the same. How did my dad think that I would see God by him treating me the way that he did? You see, I don't know if you realize this or not, but we pass on our feelings toward God the way we see our earthly father. If we see him as a performance-based, hate-mongering dad, that's how we're going to see God. It's not fair to him, but that's the way it rolls. That's how I saw God. If I did the right stuff, did the right things, then I'd be okay. Then he would say he was proud of me. I even went through confirmation in the Methodist Church, and honestly, I can't even tell you what that means today. I don't even know. Went through all those things. Didn't hear about Jesus until I was 21. But I was in the church. What happened for me is after I got my scholarship to play football, I went to a small JUCO, and then during that time, I started getting all the phone calls, all the recognition, all the things happening. And I remember that my dad's face the first time a letter came from the school that he went to. See, my dad's from Nebraska, all right, so don't hold that against us, all right? I am a Nebraska fan, full on, okay? But he went there. I remember the first time I saw his face when a Nebraska letter came. And then I got the invite for the Big Red School. And then I got this meeting after the Big Red School with Tom Osborne and at the time Milt Tepner, the offensive line coach. They were so excited. But I went to a JUCO instead because I had a little bit of power. All right? But in between time, I started working at a bar as a bouncer. Okay? And I'm sure that's probably hardest for some of you to believe that I played football and I was a bouncer, but that's just how it was, all right? But let me tell you, working in that bar completely changed my life. All right? And I'm here to share with you, it doesn't matter where you start, it's how you finish that matters, okay? I actually met my wife in that bar. Now, if you are not married and you are single, I do not recommend by any way, shape, or form going to a bar to find your future spouse. I'm just sharing you my story, okay? All right? It's my story. Don't go to a bar, all right? But it was through that relationship with her, she met a woman pastor who was everything that she needed. But through that woman pastor, I met this group of men. And these men saw me. And they said, you need to come hang out with us. And I was so hungry. I was so hungry at that time as a 21-year-old man that I met with him at 5:30 in the mornings, on Wednesdays and 6 in the morning on Sundays because I just wanted that positive affirmation from a man, for that man saying that he would love me, that he would care for me no matter what. And I never had it. How many of you want to be remembered when you die? You want to be remembered saying that I left my mark on this planet, that I made a difference. Now, what does a male dog do to let you know he's been there? He marks his territory. As I was going out trying to leave my mark found me. His name's Mark Cobbler, German farmer, southeast Iowa. And he saw me, and he saw all the distress that I was through. See, I don't know that if you guys realize we're all valued. We're all valued beyond measure, and I had no idea what that even meant. $5 bill. In a sense, it's not worth much. Not as much as it used to be, right? Who determines the value? Person, okay? The price that somebody's willing to pay for it, right? Would you agree with me if I said the person that determines the value is the creator of the dollar bill or the money? Okay? I had no idea that I was created for a purpose and a reason by a creator who loved me very much. Mark shared those things with me, right? I, like many of you, have been hurt, have been told that we are trash, we are nothing. We wouldn't amount to anything. Mark saw that. So all the words, man, all the hurt. See, we're like this water bottle was created to hold the water inside. Would you agree? Now, if you can't see in there, I got a little money hanging out in there. There's value inside. We're all created for a purpose and a reason, just like this bottle. We all have value, an intense value. Because somebody was willing to pay and send his only son to die for you, so you are valued beyond measure, all right? So my life was squeezed, all the hurt, all the pain, the suicide, the drugs, the alcohol, the failed relationships, the things that my dad said, things that my dad didn't do. I was crushed, thrown away like trash. Mark came into my life, saw the potential in what I thought was a piece of trash. He came, saw me, and started to speak life into me, started to encourage me, started to love on me, started to tell me that I was a man, that I had what it takes, that I could be all that God created me to be. And he blessed me with his words. Once was a piece of trash, thought to be no good, thought to no longer be able to serve the purpose it was created for, because of Mark pouring his life into me, mentoring me, and blessing me. By the time it was all said and done, I could still serve the purpose that God created me for, and knew that I was a son. But he came to me, he found me, and said that you are valued. You are my son. I can still remember the time. It was shortly after I had forgiven my dad. That's key. That is key. Shortly after I forgiven my dad, I was in a meeting with Mark, and they were talking about the father wound. Mark looked at me, and I was bawling. He came, like I said, he's shorter than I am. His actually hands are bigger than mine. He's got, like, we call them the legends. His hands are the legends. They're huge. But he wrapped me up in his arms. And if you can imagine a 400-pound man, that's me, not Mark, all right, going into a fetal position, bawling because I had a man hug me. He told me he loved me. He told me that he was so proud of me and he was glad that I was his son. I collapsed. It was because of Mark and men like Bill that I am even the man I am today. Now, if you can imagine, without Jesus, where I may have been or where I've ended up. But God has blessed me. Through Mark, we have 6 beautiful children together, my wife and I do. I have 6 amazing opportunities to be the man of God, the father of God that he's called me to be, and put a blessing upon both my boys and my girls. But if it wasn't through that relationship, I would have no idea how to do that. I have an 18-year-old daughter, 14-year-old son who's with me today, 11-year-old boy, 8-year-old girl, 6-year-old girl, 3-year-old girl. And I try my darndest every single day to let them know how much their daddy loves them. Let me give you one thing as I close, that I know this Jesus thing, this blessing thing, this God thing works, all right? A lot of times my youngest son, God uses him to speak to me in many different ways. When he was 3, he was painting his fingernails with his mom. Because he was with his mom, he loves his mom, wants to do what mom does, right? Now, Mama, my wife, being the protective mom that she is, actually there's one person on the planet I'm afraid of, and I sleep with her. She lives in my house, all right? Any amens for the other men out here, right? But she's a mama bear all the way through, all right? And as I close, listen here. She said to him, because she knows how people can make fun of people can hurt people, right? As he was painting his fingernails, she's like, son, she said, Lukey, people may make fun of you because of the way your fingernails are painted, the way you look. He didn't even blink, didn't even think. First words out of his mouth. Yeah, but my dad won't. He was 3. He already had the understanding that no matter what, he was my son, and I would be there for him no matter what.
Thank you, Bubba. Bubba is, Mark is still his mentor and his friend, and I've been on Bubba for about years now. How many years? I don't know, a lot of years. And he's working on it, but he's not got it done. But he's writing a book, and it's going to have a target on the front with an arrow in the bullseye, and it's going to be called Finding Your Mark. And so I think when that book hits the bookshelves, everybody needs to read it, because it sounds to me like it's going to be thank you so much, Tim. It's going to be a book that could change lives for sure. So I need something to set on here. Let me see that little deal, David, please. So I have my wife with me today. Honey, would you hold your hand up? My wife is, she doesn't always get to go with me into prisons. Sometimes she does, but it's always good to have her, because she took the higher road of forgiveness in our life. Our marriage there was no hope for it. I used to leave her for weeks at a time, and she took the higher road of forgiveness and forgave me for all the unfaithfulness. And today we share together sometimes in churches about how God restored our marriage. So it's just so good to be here. I'd like to open with prayer. Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for this important message, God. And I just thank you for you allowing me to bring this message today. I just pray that the eyes of people's hearts would be open, that you'd breathe, Lord, throughout this place, God, right now. Just breathe on people, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. I traveled for about the last 29 years with a ministry that goes all over the world, really, doing prisons. Bill Glass, the great defensive end for the Cleveland Browns, started a prison ministry 44 years ago, and I've had the privilege of traveling with them for the past 28 or 29 years. I heard Bill give the Father's blessing years ago, and about 27 years ago, I went to Bill. It had such an impact on my life. I went to Bill and said, could I have permission to do the Father's blessing? And he, of course, blessed me to do it. And so I've been doing this now for the last 27 years, and some of the places I've done it it's been amazing what's happened. So one of the most important things in the world is blessing. And what does blessing really mean? It means well worth. It means I love you. It means you're accepted. I accept you, I love you, and you have worth. And when we bless someone, the Webster Dictionary says it's a noun. It means approval that helps or allows you to do something. Number 2, it's help and approval from God. And number 3, it's something that helps you or brings you happiness, to be blessed, to have a blessing. The reason that a lot of people don't want to talk about the blessings is because mostly they don't understand it, or they don't want to admit that they weren't blessed by their dads. And, I believe that it starts with the fathers. I don't believe we have a criminal problem. I don't believe we have a drug problem. I don't believe we have a overcrowding prison problem. I believe we have a father problem. My mentor, Bill Glass, says, he quoted this. This is a quote from Bill. He said, "Not every man that didn't get his father's blessing goes to prison, but almost every man in prison didn't get his father's blessing." And as I've really thought about it and studied it over the last few years, it starts with the fathers. It's the father's blessing. And the way I was able to make things right with my 4 children, it was through the last verse in the Old Testament in Malachi, chapter 4, verse 6. It says, God will restore the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. And it doesn't say I'll restore the hearts of the families or the parents. It doesn't say I'll restore the hearts of the wives to the children. It says I'll restore the hearts of the fathers to the children. So as I read that, I look and go, we've always had a father problem. Fathers have never done what they were supposed to do. And we need to do what Tim's saying, appeal to heaven, that we could be fathers, that we could take the rightful place that we should take as fathers. Hopefully at the end of today we'll understand how important it is. One of the most powerful blessings that you'll find is in the Word of God in Matthew. When Jesus was baptized, the blessing's given in 3 ways. It's given with a touch, it's given with a word, and it's given unconditionally. And one of the most powerful blessings is when Jesus came up out of the water and the dove came down and touched him, and then a voice from heaven said, my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. That's a powerful blessing to say, you're my son, I'm well pleased in you. And I've been going into prisons and jails now for, like I said, the last 28, 29 years. And I ask questions a lot of times to inmates. I'll be talking with an inmate, and I'll say, tell me about your dad. I hate my dad. I never knew my father. I've never met my father. Don't talk to me about my father. My mother was my father. Those are the kind of answers I get. Why do you think that is? Because moms did a better job than dads. If you watch NFL on Sundays, is this thing even working? Do I even need this?
You turn that one on, you can. Give it 2 seconds.
Is it working now? Yep, there it is. If you watch NFL on Sundays, you'll see that moms did a better job. The guy runs in the end zone, does his little fancy dance, runs to the sidelines, takes his helmet off, looks at the camera and goes, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Mom." It's always that same nauseating, "Hi, Mom." How come they never go, "Hi, Dad"? Because Dad was never there. Dad may have been there, but Dad wasn't there. Dad always kept the blessing just out of reach. Kid comes home and says, "Dad, I scored 3 touchdowns tonight." "I know, son. I was in the stands. I saw you. But if you'd have scored 4, it would have been a state record." "Dad, I got all A's on my report card." "Well, if you'd have got A pluses, you'd have been on the honor roll." They always keep the blessing just out of reach. Dads do a better job coaching than they do being fathers. I want to give you an example of what happens to men that don't get their father's blessing, that don't go to prison. Everybody in here has heard of Kirk Douglas, the great actor. Kirk Douglas wrote a book called The Ragman's Son, and I want to quote to you out of his book. This is an excerpt. "So my father, who had been a horse trader in Russia, got himself a horse and a small wagon and became a ragman, buying old rags, pieces of metal and junk for pennies, nickels, and dimes. Even on Eagle Street, in the poorest section of town where all the families were struggling, the ragman was on the lowest rung of the ladder, and I was the ragman's son. So this guy was interviewing Kirk Douglas on television, and he asked him, he said, "What do you miss most in life?" And Kirk Douglas said, "Being blessed by my father. I never received the ragman's blessing." And he had tears streaming down his face on national television, 75 years old at the time. And he said the thing he missed most in life was that he never got his father's blessing. So he really never got his father's approval. I just read an article yesterday. I was going to read it this morning, but it's way too long. It just came out yesterday. It was out of the Kansas City Star. It would have really been great here in Kansas City because it's about George Brett. And if anybody's interested later, it's broken my heart so much that I have to sit down with George Brett. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I'm going to make it happen. 25 years ago, his father died. He still has not got over the fact that his dad never approved of him. He never gave him his approval. His dad was a performance dad. He wanted everything just right. He was mean to him. He was, no matter what he did, he could never satisfy his dad. And he's never gotten over that. He admitted in this interview with the Kansas City Star guy, he's never gotten over it. 25 years now, his dad's been dead, and he still has never been able to forgive his dad, and he hasn't gotten over the fact that his dad never blessed him. He didn't use those words, bless, but that's the bottom line. And so I'm going to make it my mission in life to try to find George Brett one-on-one. I don't want to do it in public. I don't want to have the Star know about it. I just want to bless that man. I want to tell him that, God loves him, and that blessing is so important. Burt Reynolds said this. He said, "We have a saying down south, you're not a man until your pappy calls you one. And mine never did, and I never quite felt like one. So I raced cars too fast, and I boxed, and I did things to try to get my father's approval, but I never quite made it with my dad." Today in the United States, there are over 2.5 million men and women locked up in prison. And less than 1.5% of those are Jewish. Anybody have any idea why that is? 2.5 million men and women in prison today, and less than 1.5% are Jewish. This young man says they give the blessing to the children. It's called bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah. And when a child reaches a certain age, when a girl reaches a certain age, they do bat mitzvah, and the fathers bless their children. When the boys reach a certain age, they bless their children. I mean, it's not a coincidence that out of 2.5 million incarcerated inmates, only 1.5% are Jewish. So it's just, there's not much wonder why there's so many gangs today. Gangs, you may not hear much about gangs out here in Blue Springs, but I'm in prison ministry, and everywhere I go, they start warning us. I've got some friends here today that was in prison with me last weekend, and you were in Max, right? Or no, you were in the feds, weren't you, Pete? But the guys that went to Max in Lansing, they've got a lot of trouble up there right now with some gangs. There's a gang activity in every prison that I go in. Different gangs. I mean, in Texas, there's gangs that you've never even heard of, but they're the Texas Syndicate and the Mexican Mafia. Now there's a new gang called Tango Blast. They have twice as many members as the Texas Syndicate and the Mexican Mafia. They run the prisons in the whole state. And it's serious stuff. Why do you think those guys join gangs? Because it gives them a feeling of love. It gives them a feeling of acceptance. It gives them a feeling of family. It gives them a feeling of belonging to something, because they didn't have anybody to belong to. They didn't have a family to belong to, so they join a gang. I want to tell you that 1991, that's 25 years ago, I believe. My dad was 82 years old. It was the last summer he was alive. He was 82. And I went over to mow his yard for him. He didn't ask me to do it, but I wanted to do it. So I went over and popped in on him and said, "I'm going to mow your yard, Dad." And so he came out and sat in a lawn chair to watch me mow. And I was about half through mowing. It was a pretty hot summer day. And my mother come out with a couple of glasses of iced tea, and I saw her, so I shut the door off, and Dad was sitting in a lawn chair, and there was another one right by him, and I went over and sat by him, and she gave us our tea. So we're sitting there talking, drinking iced tea, and my dad looks across the yard and goes, "You missed a spot right over there." And I can't tell you how painful that was for me, because all I ever wanted to hear my dad say was, "You did a good job, son." You see, my dad was, if there's people in this room that have read my book, and you're probably getting right now having a problem figuring out what I'm talking about, because there was nobody like my dad. Back in the 60s, when 10,000 miles a year was a lot of miles to drive a car, my dad drove 25,000 miles to come visit me in prisons and jails. My dad did stuff that was not like most dads. But my dad was also a performance-oriented dad. My dad could come in this room and bring me tarps and ladders and paint buckets and rollers and say, masking tape, and say, "Paint this room." And he didn't care if it was a week-long job and I took a month. He didn't care. But when he came in there, he would look until he found something I missed. He would never come in and say, "Boy, you did a great job, son." I never heard my dad say that in my whole life. And so when he was 82 years old in 1991, and he said, "You missed a spot right over there," because he'd told me that all my life. When he taught me how to mow when I was about 10 years old, and now I'm about 50. This was 20, I'm 72 now, so it's 20-some years ago. "You missed a spot right over there." My gosh, I mean, all I wanted to ever hear you say was, "Yard looks great." But you know what? Last summer I was mowing my own yard, and I'd done mowed about 3 times over this one area, and I'm going over it again, and I'm going, "What the heck am I doing?" And then I realized there were some leaves that I was trying to chop up. Just a couple leaves, but I was going over them to make sure there wasn't no leaves in the yard. And I thought, I still am trying to get my dad's approval. All these years later. Our Father's blessing is important. Our Father's approval is important. There was a guy who wanted his son, like Bubba said, our words can bless or they can bleed. They can bring life or bring death. There was a guy who wanted his son to be a great major league pitcher. And he said, when I'd pitch a game when I was 10, 12 years old, and I'd pitch a game, if I did a good job, my dad was over at the sideline with a big smile on his face. But if I was losing the game, I knew what the ride home was going to be like. Total silence. And then when we got to the house, my dad would yell, "Get in the backyard." And my dad would crouch down and say, "Hit the glove, hit the glove, hit the glove." And he'd make me pitch for 2 hours after I just pitched a game. And he said, after I became a grown man, went to college, went to Bible school, became a pastor, I would study for a whole week. I'd spend all week studying on a message that I was going to preach in 20 minutes. You know why? Because he wanted to make sure he hit the glove with God. And then one day he was on vacation and he was in a swimming pool, Tim, and God spoke audibly to him. And he said, "Son, in my eyes, you could never fail." And he went back and resigned his pastorate, his church. David, so good to see you. He went back and resigned and went on the road, and all he does now is talk about the Father heart of God and how much God loves us and how we can never fail in his eyes. No matter what we do, he loves us. I was on the Speakers Bureau for the FCA for a number of years, and I'd get calls, "Can you go to California? Can you go to Florida? Can you go to New York?" Wherever. Because they had a bio of me. It said former heavyweight boxer, ex-champion powerlifter, former underworld enforcer, one of the leading cocaine dealers in Kansas City. Everybody wanted to hear me speak. I called the head of the FCA and I said, "John, I want to change my bio." This was after I'd spoke about 2,000 times in 10 years. I said, "I want to change my bio." He goes, "What do you want to put, Bill?" I said, "Here's what I want my bio to say. Bill Corum, a man that God really loves." He said, "Well, probably nobody have you come and speak." And I said, "I don't care. I really don't. And when I speak in prisons or in churches, I want you to know I'm a man God really loves. I'm Bill Corum, a man God really loves. But I want you to know that you're people he really loves. Every man and woman and child in this sanctuary, he really loves you. a love deeper than you can even imagine. So then there was also a guy that wanted his son to be a great major league catcher. And he said that after the game they would be driving home and his dad would say, "You're going to be a great major league catcher." And he'd say, "But Dad, I threw the ball over the second baseman's head." "What an arm you got, son." "Dad, I struck out all 3 times I got up to bat." "What a swing you got. You're going to be the best." So we can either bless or bleed with our words, can't we? When Pete Rose broke Ty Cobb's long-standing hit record, and he got to first base when he made that hit that broke the record, and he got to first base, the whole entire 40-some thousand people stood to their feet and cheered because they knew that he had just broken Ty Cobb's record, Pete Rose. So afterwards, the reporter sticks a mic in Pete Rose's face and says, "Tell me what you were thinking about when the whole crowd stood to their feet and cheered." And he said, "I wondered if my dad was looking down from heaven, if I had his approval." See, we never stop needing our dad's approval. My friend Bill Glass had played 10 years for the Cleveland Browns, All-Pro, one of the greatest defensive linemen that ever played for him. His son's 6'7", 280. He also played pro football. Bill said one day his 6'7", 280 son come over, and he reached up and grabbed him by the ears and pulled him into him. And he said, "I love you, son. I'm so glad you're my son. I'm so proud of you. There's no one like you." And he said his son backed away with tears streaming down his face and said, "Dad, I needed that." Because we're never too old to need our Father's blessing. When Jacob was the first con man. Jacob stole the blessing from his brother. And Isaac said, "Come near that I might hug you and kiss you and bless you." He wasn't talking to a little boy. He was talking to a full-grown man. And so the blessing's given with a touch or a hug. It's given with a word. It's given unconditionally and forever. And it has to communicate 3 things. It has to communicate love and value and belonging. Those are the 3 things that blessing has to communicate. There's a book, it's called Chicken Soup for the Father's Soul. Anybody ever read that book? In that book, John Trent wrote about a father that decided to take his daughters on a date night every week. He had a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old, and he'd take them out every week. And he also had a 2-year-old, but he didn't take her. And the 9 and 10-year-old would come home and brag to their mom and their little sister about their date with Daddy. And the 2-year-old said, "I want to go on a date, Daddy." And he said, "You're too young. When you're 3, you can go." And she said, "I'm not." He said, "You're only 2." And she said, "No, I'm not. I'm 2.5, and I want to go now." So he took her to McDonald's and bought some Egg McMuffins, and he put them in between them. And he reached out and took her by her hands. And he said to her, "You're mine, and I'm glad. I'm proud you're my daughter. I'm so glad to be your daddy. I love you so much." And he tried to pull his hands away, and she said, "More, Daddy, more." And so then he took her back by the hands, and he said, "You play so well with your sisters. You obey your mother so well. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so glad you're my daughter." And she said, "Longer, Daddy, longer." Because we want to hear that message of, acceptance and well-doing and belonging. We want to hear that message. Every one of us wants to hear that. Little girls need their father's blessing too. I tell men in prison, if you got a little girl, you get out of here, and you got a little daughter, and you don't pick her up and hold her on your lap and kiss her and hug her and tell her how special she is. For you guys, Blake, you're getting ready to get married and you're going to have kids. If you don't hold your little daughter on your lap and tell her how special she is, and there's nobody like her, and that she means everything to you. I said, if you don't do that, when she's about 13, she'll find a man that will. Because every little girl wants to be held by a man, and they want their daddy to hold them. And if their daddy don't hold them, they'll find a man to hold them. And so we have to do that. It's important. I've got a friend that he's been married over 30 years, and his wife, his father-in-law lives out of town. He lives here in Kansas City. And he said every Sunday his wife calls her dad. And every Sunday she gets off the phone crying. Because every Sunday she asks her father to bless her, and he refuses to bless her. He says, if I bless you, you'll get big-headed. If I bless you, I can't remember all the stuff, but basically he refuses to bless his daughter because he said that it'll go to her head if he blesses her. And so he can't bless her. And so, I mean, my friend is brokenhearted about it. And you know, he said to me, because I always have done this Father's blessing for men. And he said, Bill, you need to start doing it for women too. Because there's women that need their Father's blessing. And so I do it different now than I used to do it. But the women need their blessing too. I've skipped around. I'm not using my notes very good, so I'm going to just keep moving here. If you think the blessing's not important, when Esau lost the birthright and the blessing, which one was he more concerned about? The blessing. The birthright was the financial part, you know, the land, the animals, and the money, or whatever, gold, whatever they had. But he didn't even care about that. He lost both of them. He was concerned about the blessing. His father's blessing was so important that as a grown man he would cry and beg for it. In Genesis 27, when you get home today, Genesis 27, verse 30 through 38, you read about it, and you'll see that there's 4 times he begs his father for the blessing. In verse 34, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me too, my father. In verse 36, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? Verse 38a, do you have only one blessing? Verse 38b, bless me too, my father. Then Esau wept aloud over the blessing. He wanted the blessing. No one's words have more influence in the life of a child than that of their parents, especially the father. You may be sitting here today saying, my dad loved me. He just never said it. We weren't a hugging family. We didn't, you know, we weren't mushy, and my dad he loved me, but he just never told me he loved me. Well, I'll tell you this, I can't say your dad didn't love you, but if he never told you he loved you, he didn't bless you. A bell is not a bell unless you ring it, you know. And we have to speak those words. I've got a friend that did 21 years in maximum security prison in Florida, and he said that when his wife used to come and visit him, the guys would line up, the wives would line up down below, they'd be up on the tier, and he said every week he'd yell, or she'd yell up, I love you, Jack, and he'd go, I love you, kitten. And he said he noticed nobody else ever did it. So one Sunday, I love you, Jack, I love you, kitten. He hit the guy next to him and said, tell your wife you love her. He said, right now? And he goes, yeah, right now. He said, out loud? He goes, yeah, out loud. So the guy goes, I love you. She said, I couldn't understand you. He goes, I love you. And she said, oh yeah, me too. She didn't know how to respond. He hit the guy next to him, tell your wife you love her, tell your wife you love her, tell your wife you love her, tell your wife. So there's like 8 or 10 guys every Sunday. And he said after about 3 months, the whole atmosphere of that prison began to change. Because every Sunday they'd go, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. He said it was like the whole place, something started happening. Because these guys were speaking life, and their wives were speaking life back to them, not being ashamed to say, I love you. And I know, like, I've got 2 sons that are grown men. Matter of fact, one will be 50 this year, and the other is going to be 47 this year. And anytime, I don't care if I'm in their office or if I'm in the grocery store or anywhere I see my boys, I never let them get away without a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Now, I have not always been that way. Believe me. And that story is in my book. You can read it. I have not always been like that. I was a Christian 10 years before I figured out that I wasn't being a good dad. So I've only been being a good dad for 23 years now. But God's let me have a second chance. He's a God of second chances. When you were a little kid, you played games, and if you messed up, you got a do-over, right? Remember that? I got a friend that wrote a book called God Loves Do-Overs. And God gives us a chance to do it over, you know. So I was in a prison about a couple of years ago, a maximum security prison down in Florida, and I did the Father's Blessing. And I said, if you're in this chapel, there's about 100 men in there. I said, if you're in this chapel and you've never had your father tell you he loves you, you've never had your dad put his arms around you and give you a hug. And I don't bless women that way, don't get me wrong. But I do men. I said, if you never had your dad hug you and pull you in and say, I love you, son, and I'm so glad you're my son. If you've never had that, I want you to come forward. The first guy jumped up, big old, been in prison 35 years, big old tall dude, about 6'3", and had a patch on his eye, a black patch. He jumped up and screamed, I want to be first, and ran from the back of the chapel into my arms. And I held him, and he bawled like a baby in front of all those men. And I got a letter a few weeks afterwards from some of the inmates saying, Bill, that Father's Blessing changed this whole prison. Men who had never had their Father's Blessing. So the Father's Blessing is so, so important. Now, I'll tell you this. There's another little ingredient that I've only learned in the last, I've been doing the Father's Blessing 25, 26 years now. But I only learned this ingredient lately. And it's key. It has to happen. Part of the Father's Blessing is that you forgive your father. And like in my case, I didn't do it till my dad was already dead. I didn't even realize I needed to forgive him. But when I did, it released something in me. Because unforgiveness, I mean, I'm sure there's people in here that have got unforgiveness towards someone or bitterness towards someone. And I'm going to tell you what, unforgiveness and bitterness is like you drinking poison and hoping it hurts the other person. It doesn't work. And unforgiveness and bitterness is like a cancer that will eat at you. And it don't just affect you, it'll affect your whole family. It'll affect your wife and your kids and your friends and your workmates. And I mean, it will literally affect everyone if you have unforgiveness and bitterness in your heart. And it's not, you give the person that you can't forgive too much power over you. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Gridiron Gang. Anybody ever see that movie with The Rock? It's a great, I mean, it's got a lot of language in it. But I tell you what, there's some scenes in there that are so powerful. And we have to learn to forgive. And if we can't forgive, I mean, The Rock's talking to one of the kids saying, you got to forgive your old man because you're giving him too much power over you. My old man did the same thing to me, and the kid looks at The Rock and goes, when did you forgive your dad? And The Rock turns his head away from the kid so he can't see him. And when he turns around, he's got a big tear running down his face, and he said, until just now. So he's telling him to forgive, but he hadn't done it. But he did just now. He said, until just now. We have to forgive people because we give them too much power. Even if they're dead, we got to forgive them. We got to let it go. We have to. If you're a Christian, now if you're not a Christian, maybe it's negotiable. But if you're a Christian, it's not negotiable. The Bible says if we don't forgive others, our Heavenly Father won't forgive us. We have to forgive. It's not even an option for a Christian. We have to forgive others. So that's the one thing I'd like for you to, in your mind, if you come forward today and I pray for you, Bubba prays for you, Greg prays for you, I want you to, for sure and for certain, you have to forgive. And if you're having trouble forgiving them, then do this. When Jesus hung on the cross, He didn't say, I forgive you because you didn't know what you were doing. What did He say? Father, forgive them. So, start out by that. If your dad mistreated you, your dad never ever told you he loved you, your dad disappeared, like I just gave a blessing to an old man in a prison down in Texas. I talking to him and I said, you didn't have a good relationship with your dad, did you, James? This guy's been locked up 32 years. He said, Bill, when my mom was pregnant with me, my dad went to prison. I've never met my dad. I never saw my father. And so I gave him a father's blessing. And you may have, whatever the situation, but you got to forgive him. And so you might start out by going, Father, forgive my dad, because he didn't know what he was doing. Because maybe he had a dad that mistreated him, and he didn't know how to give the father's blessing. So the the forgiveness part is key. And whether you do it right now or whether you do it in your heart, whatever, but it's got to happen. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to just invite you. Huh? Oh yeah, would you please, Jared? Jared, are you got it queued up already? The song I'm going to play. Okay, before you start, I want to just tell you that this song is so powerful, and some of you here have heard it because Tim says you guys play it here, but some of you here have never heard it. I want to tell you some of the words in this song. It says, all men are broken, and broken men break their children, who grow up to break their children. But I'm bigger than that. That's what God's saying. This is a lady singing this song, but it's like God speaking. All men are broken. Broken men break their children, who grow up to break their children, but I'm bigger than that. God's bigger than that. And no matter what, this key could change your life today. So as we play this song, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to play this song, and I want, if anybody here wants to receive a Father's blessing, Greg, would you come on up, please? Come on up, please. Greg is one of my buddies that came out today just to help us here. I didn't even know he was coming. I'm just so blessed to see him. He drove from Olathe, and I want Bubba to come up if he would. Bubba drove 6 hours to get here. So, anyway, I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to just open it up. And if you want a Father's blessing, if you're a man or a woman, come up, and we want to bless you and just speak life to you today. So, Father, thank you for this opportunity today, and I thank you, God. Go ahead with that song, brother. Thank you, Father, for the just awesome blessing to be able to pray for these folks today and bless those that need to be blessed. And don't be ashamed and don't be afraid. And if you're here and your own father's here with you and he wants to go to you and bless you, or I know there's situations, but whoever, whatever, just get your blessing today. Don't leave without it. In Jesus' name. Would you turn that off, please?
Just broken brothers. Listen, my child, listen to me. I'm not like your father. Why are you putting that on me? Listen, listen. I'm not like your father. I'm not like your father, 'cause even the best of them are just broken brothers. Listen, for all men are broken, and broken men break their children, who grow up to be broken men. But I'm bigger than that. Listen, I'm bigger than that. And all men are broken, and broken men break their children, who grow up to be broken men. But I'm bigger than that. Come to me, I'm bigger than that. I'm not like your father. And some of you have been so afraid of repeating the same mistakes that fear has you frozen. But listen, listen, I have the power to change things, and I have the power to make you It's a new day. You're not like your father. And the sins of your fathers and their fathers and their fathers and their fathers' fathers will not be on you. Just keep on coming, keep on coming, keep on coming, keep on coming. Listen, my beloved one, all men are broken, and broken men break their children, who grow up to be broken men. But listen, I'm bigger than that. You gotta let your fathers go. Your fathers were broken by their fathers, who were broken by their fathers and their fathers, on and on and on and on and on and on. But we're all in this together, and there's only one good Father. There's only one good Father. He's the Father of all creation. He's the Father of lights, the Father of glory, and He loves us so well. And all He says is everything is in my hands. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. You're gonna be okay. No regrets. Everything is in my hands. It's gonna be alright. You're gonna be okay. And some of you have been so full of regret, but your babies are my babies. Listen, your babies are my babies, and I will be the father, 'cause your babies are my babies. I'm gonna turn it all around. Just wait and see. I'm gonna make everything beautiful just in time. I'm gonna turn it all around. Just wait and see. No regrets. I'm gonna make everything beautiful just in time. I hear Him singing over you, and some of you, I hear Him saying your name, saying your name. And He says to you, I'm not like your father. Listen, my beloved one, I'm not like your father, 'cause even the best of them are just broken brothers. Listen, my child, listen to me. I'm not like your father. Why are you putting that on me? Listen, listen. I'm not like your father. I'm not like your father, 'cause even the best of them are just broken brothers. Listen, for all men are broken, and broken men break their children, who grow up to be broken men, And some of you have been so afraid of repeating the same mistakes that fear has you frozen. But listen, listen, I have the power to change things, and I have the power to make you new, and I have the power to rearrange that same old chain. And listen, you're not like your father. It's a new day. It's a new day. You're not like your father. And the sins of your fathers and their fathers and their fathers and their fathers' fathers will not be on you. Just keep on coming, keep on coming, keep on coming, keep on coming. Listen, my beloved one, all men are broken, and broken men break their children, who grow up to be broken men. But listen, I'm bigger than that. You gotta let your fathers go. Your fathers were broken by their fathers, who were broken by their fathers, and the fathers, on and on and on and on and on and on. But we're all in this together, and there's only one good Father. There's only one good Father. He's the Father of all creation. He's the Father of lights, the Father of glory, and He loves us so well. And all He says is everything is in my hands. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. You're gonna be okay. No regrets. Everything is in my hands. It's gonna be alright. You're gonna be okay. And some of you have been so full of regret, but your babies are my babies. Listen, your babies are my babies, and I will be the father, 'cause your babies are my babies. I'm gonna turn it all around, just